Lincoln was a nice person and he shouldn't have gotten shot for just letting the go of the slavery.
Okay, that's a great opinion, but we're asking about why the author wrote the story, remember? So to teach us. Okay, all right, so let's read ahead and we're going to find out, see if we can figure out why the author wrote this story. Okay. A great man. Abraham Lincoln was the 16th president of the United States. Many people say he was the greatest president.
What? Donald Trump was the...
I wonder why people think he's the greatest president. Why do you think people might think he's the greatest president of all time? Just think back to what we learned already about Abraham Lincoln. Jade, why do you think people might think he's the greatest president of all time?
Because he tried to put black people and white people together.
So he tried to end slavery. He wanted black people and white people to be together. And some people might think that he's the greatest president because of that. That's a great thought process. I like that idea. Gabriel, did you have something different?
I would say that he signed a contract.
What kind of contract? It's a big word. Does anybody remember?
I know.
No, close enough. Ellie, you want to help out?
Yeah, he signed a contract to end slavery.
Do you know what it's called? It's a really big word. It's called the Emancipation Proclamation.
I was going to say that.
Remember, we're raising our hands to speak. We're not talking out loud.
That's a giant word.
We're raising our hands to speak. All right. Lincoln was a very good speaker and leader. His actions helped free African Americans from slavery. So why do you think the author is trying to tell us, well, why do you think the author did tell us that he ended slavery? Do you think that's an important thing to know?
Yeah.
Why do you think the author wanted us to know that? Jariah.
So there's no more slavery and people don't have to get hit with the wax. With the what?
I'm not sure I followed what you said, Jariah.
What? Wax? What's a wax? I don't know what's a wax.
So are you saying that it's important to know who ended slavery because it was a really big thing that happened and that people aren't mistreated anymore? That's what you tried to say, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Growing up, Lincoln was born in Kentucky on February 12, 1809. His family moved to Indiana in 1816 and to Illinois in 1830. That was a long time ago. That was over 200 years ago.
200.
Lincoln didn't go to school, but he learned to read and write. He studied law and became a lawyer. Family. Lincoln married Mary Todd in 1842. They had 4 sons. Edward and William died very young. Others were named Robert and Thomas. So he had 4 sons. 2 of them died very early. Why do you think that 2 sons might have died really early, 200 years ago? I mean, things were really, really different back then, right?
Yeah, look at him. He looks like...
Remember, we raise our hands if we have a comment. Ellie.
Because when Abraham Lincoln was president, there was a fight going on with the Africans and the Americans.
Well, they weren't fighting the Africans. They were fighting about slavery, which was about African Americans.
About slavery.
Mm-hmm.
And the 2 sons might have, were walking and someone, shoot at them.
So you think that they could have died in the war? That's a possibility. They could have. Wars, a lot of people die in wars. That happens a lot. Do you have another idea, Jade?
Yeah, probably that they broke a rule or something.
Why would they have died because they broke a rule?
I don't know.
I would hope they wouldn't die because they broke a rule.
I don't know.
Another idea is that back then, 200 years ago, medicine and doctors were not quite as advanced as they were now. And so when you got sick back then, you had a higher chance of dying. So yes. So they could have gotten really sick when they were young, and they could have passed away because they didn't have the proper medicine to take care of their sickness. Sometimes people died from getting the flu.
Wait, before you move.
This one's Abraham Lincoln right here. And these are his sons and his wife. Have a seat, crisscross applesauce.
I know that one.
Okay, leader. Lincoln was elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 1847. Does anybody know what the word elected means? Raising our quiet hands. Stephanie.
That he wanted to be vice president to be a president.
Elected, close. Good try. Elected doesn't mean he wants to be. Elected means Jordan.
He got the most votes to be the president.
Great. He got the most votes to be, well, for the U.S. House of Representatives. Not the president yet. Presidency comes later. But right now, that means he was voted. Elected means he got the most votes, and that's what the people wanted. They wanted him to be in the U.S. House of Representatives.
Did he get to go 2 times or 1 time? 1 time.
One time. He ran for U.S. Senate. That's another big part of the government. These are all big words. They're parts of the government. In 1858, he lost, but many people thought he was a good speaker. Why do you think the authors wanting us to know about things that he lost or things that he failed at? I want you to turn and talk to people next to you. Why do you think that the author wants us to know that he failed at things? Talk with Ellie and Chase and Stephanie. I'm just going to listen in. So we know that Lincoln is the president, or was the president. Why do you think it's important to know that before he became president, he failed at something? He failed because he was too old. I hope he wouldn't fail because he's too old. Do you think that the author might have wanted us to know the things that he failed before he succeeded, because it's important to get up and try again, and even though you fail, that you can try again and you will eventually succeed, right? Yes, we're going to give everybody a chance to talk. Five, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. I'm sure it was an accident. Calm down, please. Thank you for getting ready to continue our conversation and our story. The election of 1860. Lincoln was elected U.S. president. There's that word again, elected. That means people voted for him, and he won in 1860. Before he took office, South Carolina seceded from the United States. Seceded means that they separated. South Carolina did not want to be a part of the United States anymore. More states followed. They were worried that Lincoln would outlaw slavery. So I wonder if South Carolina seceded from the United States, maybe because they didn't want to end slavery. Why would some people not want to end slavery? If it was such a bad thing, why do you think some people wouldn't want to end slavery? Jade.
I think they don't want to end slavery because they want to keep working and
that some black people, white people are getting along a little bit.
Okay, so they don't want to. You think they don't want to end slavery because then they want the African Americans to keep working, right? Because then they're wondering, well, who's going to work if we don't have them working, right? Does anybody else have any ideas about why some people might not want to end slavery? Ellie.
Because those people might still want them to have slavery because the black people.
Sebastian. Sorry, Ellie. Go
The
ahead.
black people, they were working so hard, and the white people just kind of laid around. But if slavery ended, both of them had to work, and the white people weren't used to that, so they didn't want to work all day. They wanted to keep slavery.
Okay, that's a good idea too. So what Ellie is saying is that some white people didn't want to work. They were used to not having to do all the work themselves. Stephanie.
Like I am going to say almost like the same thing that Ellie said. That the people didn't want to keep working, so then they wanted to keep slavery. So they wanted to keep slavery because they wanted to keep
Working, right?
yeah.
Those are all very good ideas. I think another thing that we might want to add is that unfortunately at this point in time, African American slaves were considered property. Like a desk. Like this desk belongs to me. An African American person was considered property like a desk or a car or anything else. It's tape dispenser. And that's not very fair. So a lot of people thought, well, you're taking my property away from me. You're taking things that I own away from me, which even though it's not very right, that's the thought process they had. These states formed the Confederate States of America. So the states that seceded, that tried to leave and followed South Carolina, they became the Confederate States of America. The Civil War. Lincoln wanted to keep the United States together, so that means that he didn't want them to separate. Why do you think that he wouldn't want the states to separate from each other? I want you to do another turn and talk. Why do you think the states? You like turn and talk, Christian? Good. Go around and I'm going to listen. I want you to talk about it. Why do you think he wanted the states to stay together? So he doesn't want them to fight? What do you think? Okay, so you think that if the states didn't stay together, people would die from the war? Why do you think that? Okay, and they're having a war, so why? You gotta explain why. Remember, why is very important so that we know what goes on in your brain, right? So, do you remember why we're having the war in the first place? Why? Well, they didn't end it yet. They're fighting to end it. So the states that don't want to end slavery versus the states that do want to end slavery, right? So you think maybe that he didn't want the states to separate because then America might not be as strong as it used to be, right? Think about that. I want you to think about that. I want you to talk with each other. Oh, not gonna fall. Oh, be careful. Keep our inner voices, okay? Okay, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Why do you think you wouldn't want the states to separate from each other? I want to hear some of your thoughts. I want to hear some of those ideas you came up with. Gabriel.
So they don't want to fight.
He doesn't want to fight. He wants to keep the states together Because, Sebastian, please sit crisscross applesauce, and then I'll answer. You can share your, thank you. You can share your ideas.
Because if they get lost, then we'll kill them.
Kill who?
The people.
What people?
The people was inside who joined the presidency. The slavery union?
I'm not sure I'm following what you're saying.
Maybe the slavery is talking.
You were talking about were you talking about kill the slaves or kill the people that were fighting against the president?
Kill the people that fight against the president.
Okay, so they unfortunately had to go to war, yes, and people that were fighting against the president and people that were fighting for the president. People on both sides died. Think about teamwork. When you work together and you have two minds coming together, isn't your work and your thoughts, isn't everything better and stronger? Teamwork, you work together, everything's stronger. And then when you're fighting with each other and you're not working together, you're weaker, right? You're weaker because your work's not as good. You don't get as much of it done. So do you think that maybe you wanted all the states to stay together because the United States of America would be stronger when they're all together? Because when they're separate, they could be weaker, right? Okay, let's continue. Oh, bless you.
Bless you.
So he was willing to go to war to keep the states together. The American Civil War began in 1861. So that's the people who didn't want slavery and the people who did want slavery. Then Lincoln had to take a stand on slavery. Take a stand means that he had to pick a side. So he had to pick, am I going to be against slavery? Am I going to be for slavery? He had to make up his mind.
They're for slavery.
Oh, I don't think he was for slavery. He was against slavery because he didn't want it to happen.
What is
So,
slavery?
slavery is when the African Americans were forced to do work. When they weren't free, they couldn't do whatever they wanted to do. They had to do what other people told them to do. Remember?
Yeah.
So, a proclamation. On January 1st, 1863, Lincoln said that all slaves living in the Confederate States were free. Soon after, Lincoln gave his famous speech, Gettysburg Address. He honored those who had died during the Civil War. So the Gettysburg Address, I remember when I was in school, and I was in elementary school back when, 300 years ago when Miss Burdick was in elementary school, I had to memorize parts of the Gettysburg Address, and I had to perform it. I had to be dressed as Abraham Lincoln with a top hat and a beard.
It was,
Yes.
He was very tall.
He was very tall. I couldn't make myself taller, unfortunately, but I remember having to memorize parts of this and perform it in front of the entire class.
I know that.
How would you guys feel if you guys had to perform this Gettysburg Address
Scared.
in front of the whole class? Gabriel, how would you feel?
Scared. Frustrated.
You'd feel scared and frustrated? Why would you feel scared and frustrated? Remember, we're raising our hands. Jordan, why would you feel scared and frustrated?
Because I am shy of people that I don't know, and some people I do know, I'm shy.
Okay, you're shy? Well, don't worry. I'm not going to make you memorize the Gettysburg Address. I'm not going to make you have to perform it. I just wanted to share something that I remember that I can relate to about this story.
I know some.
I would have.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, all eyes on me. Boys and girls, it's very important to remember that if we want to share, we're not speaking out loud. We're raising our hands and waiting to be called on. And if you're not called on, that's okay, because sometimes we need to continue with the lesson, but we're not calling out. We're raising our quiet hands. Okay, so he honored those who died during the Civil War. Why do you think it was something that he wanted to do? Why do you think he wanted to honor the people that died in the Civil War? Isabella.
Well, because he doesn't want anybody to die
and he,
Well, they already did die.
yeah.
So, do you know what the word honor means?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Well, it means that that you really don't want
You want someone to help you out?
yes, please.
Gabriel, you know what honor means?
That they honor the people that died in the Civil War, and they like the people that wanted like the people that wanted to have slavery and didn't have slavery died, and they sometimes died.
Okay. Well, honor means that they want to respect and remember those people that passed away. Because it's very important. A human life is a very important thing. And they want to remember those people that died for what they believe in.
Like a memory statue of them.
Remember, we're raising our hands. Yes, Jordan?
Do they still have the gravestone?
That's a good question. That's something that I would have to find out and get back to you on because I'm not sure.
Abraham Lincoln and George Washington?
I'm not. Well, they have a Lincoln Memorial, but I don't know where their gravestones are, and I don't know if the people that died in the war still have gravestones. That's a good thing to find out. Okay, so they wanted to honor the people who died during the Civil War, like I said, because it's a very important thing. When you die, you believe in something so much that you're willing to die to fight for what you believe in. It's very important, and those people deserve a lot of respect. All right?
I would have sacrificed myself for all of this.
Re-elected. In 1864, Lincoln was elected president again. Remember, we talked about you can be elected twice?
Yes.
So he was elected again. He saw this as a chance to free all slaves. Slavery was outlawed in 1865. Lincoln then met with Confederate leaders. Remember the Confederate? That's the people that wanted slavery. He wanted them to end the war and rejoin the United States.
So who are the people who shot him?
I know.
I'm about to get to that right now. Lincoln's death. John Wilkes Booth shot Lincoln on April 14th, 1865. Lincoln died on April 15th, 5 days after the war ended. Abraham Lincoln's leadership brought a country together. He helped end slavery. Lincoln's memory will always be honored. There's that word again, honored. Remember, we're wanting to respect and remember him because of what he did for the United States. Why do you think someone would shoot the president? The president's supposed to be helping the country, right? Why do you think somebody would shoot the president? Chase, why do you think somebody would shoot the president?
Because he wants slavery back.
So you think that somebody would shoot him because they wanted slavery back? That's a good idea. It doesn't make it right though, does it?
No.
Ralston, crisscross applesauce, please. Let's see. Somebody I haven't heard from. Brandon, why do you think someone would shoot the president if he's such a good guy?
Maybe because the guy who shot the president doesn't want all the black people and the white people to be together.
He doesn't want everybody to be together, okay? So you think maybe sometimes presidents get shot because the person who shoots them doesn't agree with what the president says or does or what he wants to do for the country, right? Yes, Isabella.
Well, he doesn't want anybody. He doesn't want. He shot the president because he doesn't like the president, and he made everyone together, and he put everyone, and he made the slaves go.
That's good. I'm glad that in my lifetime there hasn't been a president that's been shot while I've been alive. I am very glad. How would you feel if a president got shot in your lifetime and we heard it on the news? How would that make you feel?
Sad.
I want you to think about that for a moment. Think about how you would feel if we heard that the president got shot. Would that make us sad? How would we feel? Would we be scared? Christian, what do you think? You would be sad. Because the president, why? Why would you be sad?
Because the president always helps us.
Because the president helps us, and we don't want to shoot the people that help us, right? Crisscross applesauce, guys. Let's do a bottom check. Make sure you're on your bottom. Crisscross applesauce. Jaden, how would it make you feel if we learned that our president, who's our current president?
Donald Trump.
Donald Trump.
How would it make you feel if we learned that Donald Trump was shot?
Scared because the person that probably shot him, they could be coming to your house and trying to kill you also.
So you'd be scared if the person that shot the president was not caught, right? That would be a very scary thing, and I hope that that never happens. It hasn't happened in my life so far, and I hope that it doesn't happen in your life either. So now we have a timeline. It says in 1809, Abraham Lincoln is born. In 1842, Lincoln marries Mary Todd. That's my little tongue twister. Lincoln marries Mary Todd. In 1860, he becomes the president. In 1861, the Civil War begins. In 1864, he is reelected. In 1865, the Civil War ends and he dies April 15th. Why do you think an author thought it was important enough to include a timeline in the story? Ellie.
He did many great stuff, and I think the author wanted people to know what he did.
So you think the author wanted people to know what he did? These are important parts of his life.
In time.
Remember, we're thinking back. You just said that word, informed. That means to teach. He wanted us to know, right? So do you think the author's purpose for the timeline included in his book was to inform us and teach us about the things that he did? I'm sorry? Is that important right now, Jade? No, please stop. So, now that we've read our book about Abraham Lincoln and we've learned all of these things about him, we're going to revisit author's purpose. Why do we think the author wrote this book? Did he write it to persuade us something? Did he want to convince us something about Abraham Lincoln? Maybe he wanted to, did he try to convince us that Lincoln was a bad president?
No.
Did he try to convince us Lincoln was a good president?
Yes.
So maybe this isn't a persuasion piece. Maybe he did not write this to persuade. Do we think maybe he wanted to entertain us and make us laugh?
No.
I think maybe he wanted to amuse us.
No.
So maybe it's not an entertainment thing either. Maybe he didn't write to entertain us. What about informed?
Yes.
Did we learn something new about Abraham Lincoln in this book?
Yes.
Ellie, what's something that you learned? So you learned something. You learned that he was elected twice and you thought he was only elected once. Did we learn lots of other, what else did we learn, Gabriel?
That he was born a long time ago.
So we learned that he was born a long time ago. So that's teaching us something. So do we think maybe the author wrote this to inform, to teach us about Abraham Lincoln? You have a question, Dariah? What's your question?
Is that what he wanted to stop the war, so before he died, so they can't keep going with slavery.
No, he didn't want to stop the war to keep slavery. He started the war to end slavery. That's very important to remember. He did not want to keep slavery. He wanted to end it. Okay? Okay, so to conclude our story and our little read aloud session, I have this paper here. So what we want to know is the title of the book. I'm going to write it on the board for you guys so that you'll be able to see it and copy it down. I want you to circle why did the author write this story? I want you to circle whether you thought maybe it was to entertain us or to inform us. Remember, inform means to teach us. And I want you to write why. Why you thought that he wanted to entertain us, or why you thought he wanted to teach us. Think back to the things that we heard about, we read about in the story. Brandon Reynolds and Christian Chase and Jariah, I'll come around and I'll have a conversation with you guys about this and I'll help you get started, okay? So, table 1, please return to your seats, nice and quiet.